Welcome to First Draft for the month of June. We're very excited to have you guys here with us when we will be talking about writing and publishing schedules and what happens when life intervenes. I am joined by my co-hosts, who I'm going to have go ahead and introduce themselves. So I'm going to start with Alexis Ann.
Hello, I am Alexis Ann. I write contemporary and erotic romance. And today I am drinking Elijah Craig, which is my new obsession in the bourbon whiskey family. I want to go there now. To Louisville, yeah. Or Bardstown. I think they're in Bardstown. I don't know how to say that in Kentucky. Sure. Still.
Somewhere fabulous.
Yes, I want to go on the bourbon trail.
Me too.
And I am Mary Chris Escobar. I write women's fiction, and I am actually drinking a home-brewed ale. It's a Belgian, I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. It's a Belgian Golden Strong Ale made right here in my own house. And it's actually in a Green Man Brewery glass, which is in Asheville, North Carolina, which is another fabulous beer trail or alcohol trail to visit in general. So if we're going down the realm of alcohol tourism, Asheville or Green Man, and it's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got nothing in terms of the alcohol trail tourism thing, although maybe Italy. I'm drinking a Negroni. I am Julia Kelly, writing historical romance, and Julia Blake writing contemporary romance, contemporary sports romance. So this month we're talking a little bit about setting publishing schedules and then what happens when the best laid plans go a little awry. And I think maybe kicking it off a little bit. Well, you know what? Why don't we just talk about publishing schedules initially, and then we'll transition into what prompted this whole conversation. So I'm going to open it up. This is going to be a very free-flowing discussion. So
we should take some drinks so that we get the free-flowing going. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
I don't have much of a schedule, so which is not entirely true. I have this year been trying to write every day. So that is not so much a publishing schedule as a writing schedule. So I think I will let Alexis talk about publishing schedule, but I'm happy later to sort of talk about kind of having a writing schedule or a routine that helps me with that.
No, that's perfect, because the writing schedule helps you get to the end goal of the publishing.
If I had a publishing schedule, it would be important to have a writing schedule. Yes. So I'm developing good habits.
And I am on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, where I write full-time. This is what I do for a living, and it's what puts money in my bank account. So I have a very strict publishing schedule. I have certain goals that I have to hit every couple of months in order to maintain the business end of my writing business. So I start off the year with a set number of books that I know I need to write and my down months, and I have to hit those schedules. I don't know if you want me to get really specific right now, or if we...
Whatever you're comfortable with, sure.
There's body language that I'm always a little bit like, no one can see this on the podcast. But if you're watching us on YouTube, you can.
Right, we have the YouTube and then we have the podcast too, so I'm never sure, who actually.
Right, it's like the side-to-side shoulder wiggle. Like, does that mean go on, or?
It means whatever you want, baby.
So I've actually adjusted things a little bit this year, and I just threw it totally off with my last release, which was Summer Heat. It was supposed to be max out at 70,000 words, because I'm doing this whole word count, how much time it takes me to write something and then get it published. So you're maximizing how much you're making per book. Anyway, that's all complicated formula stuff. I threw all that out the window when I went 20,000 words over that on that novel. But other than that, I'm supposed to be writing a little bit shorter this year in order to hit my goals. I'm trying to, I think, have a new release every 3 months, so that my publishing schedule is paced out throughout the year. I write really fast. I have a nice fan base. I have 2 series that I'm writing in, so it's pretty easy for me to look. Easy is a relative term, obviously. There's nothing easy about what we do, or writing a book for that matter, but in business terms, it's fairly easy to look at the schedule and say, okay, here are the things that I have to hit, and I have to hit them. And then I have to hide my phone, which is buzzing.
Yep. So I am on a trad schedule, and due to some changes with my working status or working situation at my day job, I am now full on and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But basically, I know for the next 18 months what I'm publishing on the traditional side. And if I wanted to jump in with some indie work, that would mean trying to slot in around those releases. But I know that I have a book due June 1st. I have a book due August 15th. I have releases August 21st, October 9th, January, and March. So it's not just, it's always funny when I talk to people about writing and I talk to people about publishing schedules. A draft deadline is very different than your actual book being done. So a draft just means that you've got the book written. It then needs to be edited. It then needs to go through, for me, it needs a developmental edit. It needs a line edit. It needs a copy edit. It needs a proofing, maybe a second proof if you're doing a lot of changes, which hopefully you can avoid doing. But that means that's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of deadlines that are going to be slotted in. And really, I only know for sure what my first deadline is. So that's just when I literally hand the book to my editor via email. And so now I've worked with this editor and with this publishing house enough that I can kind of have a guess about when I'm probably going to hit some of these other deadlines. But part of my publishing schedule is figuring out around that how I'm going to actually get the book done and get the writing done. So publishing schedule and writing schedule really knit well together, like Mary Chris and Alexis were talking about. So.
And I think it's interesting, and I would guess, Alexis, you would say with independently publishing, it took you probably a while to learn, right? Mm-hmm. How long it takes, like what realistically your schedule can be.
Well, yeah, because I don't have a publisher dictating that this has to be in on this day at this time. I'm the one dictating that, and it was all a process, an organic process of learning what kind of length you like to write, because indies have that option of writing it differently. We're not being told by a publisher that this book has to be 50,000 words. I can go 20,000 words over that, and my readers are just happy that they pre-ordered it at the 50,000 word price, and now they got a 70,000 word price, or 70,000 word book, 20,000 words for free. Not that they know what that means. They're usually like, how many pages is that? I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny. Nobody ever knows if you're an author. You're like, I just go by word count. I don't know what you guys want from me. I think 300 maybe. I don't know.
Somebody was talking about a long email the other day at work, and I was like, oh gosh, that's probably like 1,000 words. And they were like, I have no idea what she's talking about.
Live and die by word count, guys.
Exactly.
That was probably the first big thing that I felt like I needed to get a grip on when I started working in the publishing world and trying to get into writing. Was everybody was talking about word counts, and I had no idea what those equated to, because I'm looking at a Word document and I'm like, I don't know, I have 50 pages. How many words are in this Clive Cussler over here? Can I flip through it and like estimate how many? And so that was a big learning curve to figure that out. Now my whole world is driven by word counts, and it's okay, so I need to have a June book out, which means I need to have the finished product, at the end of May, which means I need to have it by betas by the beginning of May, which means, okay, so I have 2 weeks to write 50,000 words. Okay, can I do that? Yes. And then you backtrack how many words a day that is, and you're like, okay, as long as I don't take any days off on the weekends and no one gets sick, we're good.
Yeah. Well, so maybe you can talk a little bit about back timing, because I think that is a big consideration, no matter whether you write indie or trad, is back timing against your deadline or against your book publication date.
It's all about the back timing, because the publishing date is the date. It's like graduation date. It's, the day the baby's due. It's like all that kind of stuff. It's the day. It's not going to move, and that's what you have to hit. And so everything in publishing has a time frame. Editing takes, I don't know, depending on what it is. Copy edits, you're looking at 2 weeks realistically. Developmental edits, it's probably going to be closer to a month, depending on who's looking at it and how bad your work is and how much work it's going to need and how fast you are at turning that stuff around. I work very closely with my editor, who sleeps next to me most nights. So he gets he gets my stuff fairly early. So my developmental editing is happening as I write. I'm really lucky like that. But
she doesn't even have to pay him.
Yeah. I live with him. That's payment enough. He doesn't listen to the shows. But you backtrack that. You know how long editing's going to take. So let's just say, like I was using before, a June publication. So you backtrack that 2 weeks for uploads, because you need at least 10 days for everything to get uploaded and settled at the retailers in case there's any problems with the uploads or there's all kinds of stuff. you want to make sure that the retailer, which is Nook, Amazon, Kobo, iBooks, they have plenty of time to get the product ready on their end. So you're looking at 2 weeks before that. And then before that, you have to have time to get all of the proofreading done. And before that, you have to get the developmental edits done. And before that, you have to write the book. And you have to know how long it takes you to approximately write that book, which may not be something that you know for a couple of years. For me, a novella can take a month. A full novel can take 2 months. It can also take 6 months. But if I'm hitting a publishing schedule within one of my series, I generally know how to estimate how long that's going to be based on that.
Yeah, and I don't know if you're the same way, but I always try to build in grace period for myself, because a publishing schedule is all well and good if you can hit that book and hit those deadlines every single time. But the reality is life is going to intercede. Your book is not going to go as planned. Like the book I wrote at the beginning of the year did not go as planned. It was supposed to be done January 30th, and I turned it in just before April 1st, basically like gasping to the finish line. April 1st was the deadline. So, but I had other books that I had to write. So I wanted to get the book done early so that I could let it sit and like send it to betas and edit it. And it ended up not being that kind of book. And the book that I'm writing right now, knock on wood, is just flowing beautifully, and it's amazing. And I've had to do one rewrite of a scene, and I just thought, this is really nice.
And it's beautiful when that happens.
The book could be like this. Oh, it's incredible. And you can do, I had a 6,000 word day the other day, and I had a 4,000 word day yesterday, and it's just like, this book is just moving. And when you have that, it's like a gift, and you're just like, oh, thank you. But most days and most books, I am that writer who has a daily word count, and it's back times based on my deadline, less a few days for a grace period, and I take off Saturdays and do a little bit less on the weekends. But you have to account for all those different things. And like you said, you may be able to write a 90,000 word book in 2 months. But there may also be that 90,000 word book that's going to take you 6 months, because it is just not coming. So you're going to have to be flexible and make some changes if you're able to. If you don't owe a publisher a book and you're like, oh God.
That book would have been Summer Heat, and it went out 6 weeks after my original due date, which had a 4-week grace period already built into that publishing schedule. So I would like to give the middle finger to that book.
Yeah, but it turned out great.
Beautiful.
As you say, it's a great book, and so it was worth the struggle. But you may also not be over it yet. So.
Yeah. And typically, I try to build 4 weeks extra into every book. I think, I'm going to have this book in June, so it needs to be ready in May. I build that 4 extra weeks in, and usually that works out really well. But sometimes it does not.
Kids get sick, things happen, life changes, which we can talk a little bit about, because I think we're all expert at that now. So, but yeah, I mean, stuff happens. So it is definitely advisable to have a plan B. And maybe a plan C.
And early on, right? I think so. If someone's listening to this and is really just getting started, I mean, I think what the takeaway here is you are both experienced with this, and you're both saying you build in still a really healthy grace period. So if you're just starting out in either way, indie or trad, and like build in more than they're saying, probably. Like if they're saying if the two of you are saying build in a 4-week, give yourself more than that, because you don't know yet, like you don't know your pace. So I think that's a really important takeaway, that be kind and give yourself a lot.
And that's an important word, because if you are setting yourself up with, I have these people want the next book, so I'm going to get it out by this day, and then you can't because life happens and you're so new at it, then you're really getting down on yourself, and you're getting really stressed, and you're not being kind to yourself, and you're going to burn out.
Well, and business-wise, you do not want to end up as an indie author in Amazon pre-order jail. They will penalize you if you don't deliver a book, and you have to push your book's pre-order date back. So they'll let you move it up in the calendar, but they will not let you move it back without really dinging you. And when the last time I was doing pre-orders, they would revoke your privileges for pre-order, and that's a really powerful tool as an indie author. So you want to be very careful of that and very mindful of that. But at the same time, you also, if you're working towards trad, like I have a book that's due with 2 month period of time. And I know that I can write that book and I know that I'm going to get it done. But if I wasn't an experienced author who had handed in multiple books to this editor and who had a good relationship where I can say to her, I think that this is going to be tight, or I'm not sure I'm going to make this, can I give you this book in a, raw, unedited form, which I would normally never want to give her, just straight up poured out of my brain onto the page, because that's not, that's even more work for her and it's more work for me down the line. If I didn't have that relationship, a 2-month turnaround for an 85,000 word book would be insane. It would be insane. I mean, it's insane now, but it would be truly kind of reckless, actually. So you want to be careful and you really want to be mindful. And if you have an agent who's working with you on trad projects, really push back if you think that, with your day job or with your familial obligations or whatever's going on in your life, you don't think you can make those deadlines. See if there's room where you can work with the schedule. And I have pushed back on a schedule before for different reasons. But I pushed back on a schedule before and my publisher was willing to work with me. So.
Definitely. They would rather know up front, right?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Because it affects all down the chain. If you end up missing a deadline or if you have really major issues in production with getting something back, they're not working just on your book. They're working on a whole slate of books. So if work starts to back up, it can be really problematic.
Definitely.
So do we want to talk a little bit about some of those changes that maybe can pop up in your life and make everything go haywire when you have the best laid plans?
Are we going to talk about the ones that are immediately happening in June, or is that what we're talking about?
Let's talk about the ones that are immediately happening in June.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I am now in a different state, even though it doesn't. Okay, so this show is pre-recorded. Let's get that out of the air
because of all these crazy things that are happening.
So one thing you can do to plan for major life changes, if you have a podcast, you can record in advance.
Yes, plan ahead.
So we intentionally pre-recorded this podcast because Julie and I are both no longer where we used to be. This is the last time you'll see me in this background right here, because I now live in North Carolina. I'm not a Floridian anymore. I guess I'm always a Floridian since I was born here, and I'm like a third generation or whatever. But I now live in Charlotte, North Carolina, with my family, and so we have uprooted and moved, and that has totally thrown off my publishing schedule because I was in a great groove after I got my groove back with Summer Heat. Whatever happened there is its own story. More mental health than actual moving of the body. But I've had to push back a couple of my publication dates because the move took up a lot of time. But all the books are still coming out. but I had to slide everything about 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm. I'm not in New York anymore, guys, even though it looks very much like my New York apartment right now. I'm in London. So I decided that after a lot of years of saying that I wanted to move to London and saying that I wanted to be closer to my family who lives in the UK, that I was going to make the move. And so I decided it was time to do it. So I have left my day job and I'm writing full time for the foreseeable future. Probably will be getting another day job pretty soon here, hopefully, because girls got to eat. And as great as publishing is, royalty schedules are slow in the trad world. But I decided to basically kind of, I don't want to say start over because that sounds so dramatic, but I decided to clean out my apartment and take a few suitcases and head to London. So you are going to be seeing podcasts potentially with some dog guest appearances, as I have 2 dogs at the house right now. And it's going to be it's really exciting, but it's also a lot of change, and it's a lot of physical change. And it's a lot of coordinating and figuring out, the move has been a lot of putting stuff in boxes and shipping stuff and just, rolling over 401ks, and all of that takes time, and all of that takes time out of your writing schedule. So yes. Today, on the day that we actually recorded this, I rolled over a 401k, which required 4 phone calls. I, went through and did a lot of emails back and forth to people. I did some networking stuff. I reached out to a bunch of people. I talked to a bunch of people who were, I had just announced the move, so they were saying congratulations and things like that. I had written some blog posts about moving. it's a lot of stuff that's come up, and I'm trying to make sure that it doesn't detract from the actual writing schedule, because I still have those deadlines that I've got to hit. But at the same time, you can't help but have to adjust. And so I had a conversation with my agent, and I had a conversation with my editor, both of whom are thrilled about the move and would like to pop in my suitcases. And basically was like, we may need to work with me, and I'm going to be very transparent about where I am and how these books are going, and how edits are going, and let you know realistically when I'm going to be turning stuff in. So that also means that I'm trying to actually hit an even earlier deadline than June 1st. For the book that I'm currently writing while this show is recording. So I'm trying to get stuff out of the way before I actually move, which I can do now since I'm writing full time. So knock on wood, it's going well. So
here's what I really want to know. Are you finally going to have more of a British accent?
No. I'm 31. It's not happening. I don't know how you're going to beat the California out of me. I've never acquired a New York accent, and I've lived here for 9 years, so I'm guessing that's probably not going to happen. But maybe some of the intonation might change.
You already say a lot of words different Britishly.
I do. Everybody's favorite is tomato rather than tomato.
Yes.
Yeah. So things pop into conversation, but I imagine that probably not. I have noticed that my sister, who's been there for 2 years, has started saying certain things, but it's very, very cute. I don't even know if she does it intentionally, but certain bits of conversation start creeping into her vocabulary. So
I'm curious to see if some Southern is finally going to come out of these lips. I hope not.
That's right, because you're not in the really southern part of Florida. Like,
there is no southern part of Florida.
I mean, isn't like kind of, there's a little bit more culturally close to the south, up a little further north in Florida.
It is a little different in North Florida. I went to school in North Florida, in Tallahassee, Florida State, and it was like moving to another country. I did not. Is this Florida still? In Tallahassee, a lot of people refer to it as South Georgia.
Right.
So it is different.
Grew up in the South, sort of. I don't know. I never really considered Virginia the South, and I grew up in the northern part of Virginia. But anyway, I have not acquired a whole lot of a Southern accent, so I think that there might be hope for you. However, Julia, my friend who has lived for years in Scotland and England, swears she doesn't have an accent. And I wouldn't call it an accent, but you're so right. The intonation on things, she totally has a very British intonation.
Voice pattern changes.
Yes.
And I know that because I was there for 7 months, and I have a lot of family. And when I spend a lot of time around that part of the family, I know it comes out. So, yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I think Nate will sound very different very quickly, because whenever he's around us, his family is from South Carolina, and his family will be all around us, and his accent immediately changes when he's around them. So I'm just worried I'm going to start picking it up too. I want to sound like me. I don't want to sound like him. I want to sound like me.
Fight it.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Mary Chris has some changes too, though.
I do. I have very different changes from you all. I have 0 changes in location. My background will look exactly the same when it's really June, unless I change the books around. But I have a big milestone birthday in June, so that's sort of a different kind of change. I think it's a very reflective kind of internal change. So I am turning 40 on June 9th. So depending on when we post this show, I might be 40. And it's interesting because it's one of those ages that I definitely I had sort of a life-changing thing around 30 with a friend who is my age who passed away. So I don't begrudge birthdays, so I'm not upset about 40. I'm super excited about every year. But 40 is a very reflective birthday. It's an age that I remember my parents turning,
Yes.
because I was about 10 when my parents, both were kind of turning 40. And so I remember that really well. And I remember their parties with friends, and I remember it being a milestone for them. And, I have a lot of friends who've already crossed that threshold. So I think how that impacts my writing life, it's kind of interesting, because I feel like listening to both of you talk, I'm at a little bit of a crossroads where I'm trying to decide with my next project what I'm going to do with it. If I'm going to go traditional or indie, what the next thing is. And so in a lot of ways, I do feel like I'm starting over. I've sort of given myself a little bit of a pass on this book because it is taking me a really long time to finish it, along the lines of sort of how I wrote my first book, where I really didn't have any plans for publishing it, and I have clear intention for publishing this project, but I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to do it. So it feels a little bit like a reset in some ways. And I have also just been kind of looking at creatively this year what else I could do with my writing. So obviously from the show, I love beer. And so I've been thinking about how can I maybe do some nonfiction and writing about beer, articles about beer in a more formal way than I have in the past. So I do feel like I'm not going to put all that on being 40 because I like to think I'm just generally reflective. But I do think every time you hit one of those milestones, I don't know, there's something a little added to it. And there's definitely this idea of sort of wanting to make sure, like taking stock of your life and making sure that you're sort of on a path that you want to be on. So it's interesting to sort of talk about the transition little bit in advance of it. So I'll have to listen to this again when I actually turn 40 and see how I feel. But yeah, I think it's good to be reflective all the time. But I think on those milestones, it's, I don't know, especially, I don't know, sweet or something to think about where you've been. I also hope perhaps my future self is on a fabulous trip or something for my 40th birthday.
Oh, sure too.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, it's funny that you bring up reflection. Not funny, but it's nice that you bring up reflection because it's one of those things where often, you know, when you're on a schedule and when you're rolling along, you kind of are on this path. And then I know a lot of people who've hit points in their career for whatever reason where they think, you know, I don't know if I want to be writing what I've been writing anymore. And maybe it's time to step back a little bit and to say, do I want to switch genres? Do I want to switch, you know, fiction to nonfiction? What is it that I actually want to do? And what is going to be the best step for my career? So I think in terms of my schedule, I'm about a little bit less than 18 months out right now. When I signed my contracts, I knew what I was going to be writing for the next 18 months. Alexis, I think you do about a year out. Is that right? So it allows you some time to then step back after a year and be like, okay, that was a thing I did. Is that still the thing that I want to do? Do I want to take a different tack? You know, is what I'm doing still effective? If you're looking at it from a marketing perspective, is there another genre, another opportunity that I would enjoy writing in that maybe could also serve my career? So I think it's good to have those moments of stepping back.
I had an idea when you were saying that too, because we do tend to write in a genre because you're under contract for a genre, and I have an audience that I'm writing to with my genres, but we all have other genres that we've wondered about or we've had this book idea for. And where does that ever fit into your publishing schedule? Do you try to write it on the side? Is it your weekend book? Do you set aside some time and just dive right in? Because it's a thing that it could be a big thing, you know, you don't want to not tackle it, because what if that is a huge game changer for you? Or it's also that regret thing in the back of your mind. I wrote D909 last year because I felt like this regret that I hadn't tried to tackle it in some way, shape, or form. And now that it's there, at least I have that was there. It's something I did. Whether I ever go back to it or I try something else, at least I got it out of the way. There are other books sitting there in the queue vying for my attention. And so that's always a question when I'm looking at my publishing schedule is, can I fit this in somewhere at some time? What do you guys do with that?
I mean, I had this conversation literally last week. Sorry, did I cut you off?
No.
My internet froze for a moment there. I had this conversation last week with my agent where we got on the phone and I basically said, I'm writing full time now. Tell me what I need to do to make more money. And I hate to like boil it down quite that way, but that's what it is. You know, if this is my job, what is the best way for me to go about doing that? And we came up with a bunch of different ideas, and I'm now in the land of synopses. Where I'm writing out a bunch of different, some different genres, some different publishers, some different kind of ways that we can get at, you know, some more books to fill up the schedule, not too much. But then also while we were talking about traditional publishing, I have an idea for an indie series, and we were trying to game out, okay, if I potentially landed with certain contracts at certain times, you know, is this indie series going to be something I'm also doing? Is that going to put a lot of pressure on the traditional stuff? Is it something that I'm going to have in my back pocket for the inevitable I don't have a contract, which happens with every author, whether you get dropped or you just are in between projects with a publisher and haven't gotten your pitches through and haven't gotten your option clause done. So it's one of those things where we were trying to be strategic about how to make sure that my publishing career continues in the smartest way possible. It's really hard because you can't see into the future. So, and you can't look at all the it's not sliding doors. You can't look at all the alternative, all the alternative paths that you could have taken. So you just try to do what is smartest for you at the time that you're doing it and what feels right.
I think that's it. I think it is a little bit of a lifestyle thing. Like, I think when I'm thinking about, branching into other types of writing, I like traveling. I like visiting breweries. I like drinking beer. But there is a monetary part in that. And so there's this decision, do I just start a beer blog or do I look at maybe trying to write in a more journalistic sense so that I could potentially get paid for it. And I think, that seems like a really interesting way to sort of supplement income. And I kind of like this idea of a sort of the freelance culture and how is that something I can integrate into my life a little bit more.
It's also a really smart way to promote some of your books.
Yes.
I mean,
yeah,
it gets your name out there in a different way to different audiences.
It does. And I think a lot of what fascinates me about that culture is there's just still not a lot of women in beer, but I believe that there are women beer drinkers, and I do think that there would be a crossover.
You're talking to two of them, so.
I talk to lots of them all the time, and so, I think that there would be crossover in an interesting way.
Definitely.
I agree. And that just one last, because we are at 30 minutes, but one last thing that came up there was how you create that kind of synergy between what you're writing and what you enjoy doing. And so there is that, do I take this time out of my writing time, my publishing time, to write these blog posts, to do these podcasts, to write these articles, because they are going to help feed that beast that allows me to keep writing and being able to find new people to read my books and give me new ideas and all those. It really does become its own little synergistic beast.
Yes. I mean, you have to be out there and living. And I think that's what's so exciting about moves that you all are making, and the fact that you'll be meeting new people and exploring new cities. And you have to do that. And I think that's where this idea of wanting to incorporate these things I'm already enjoying and loving into my life, you have to live that to be able to write. And so anytime you can sort of, get that synergy between what you enjoy and your writing is just great.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so since we have passed probably the 30-minute mark at this point, as we are wont to do sometimes, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up unless anybody has any other final points. Okay, so I'm going to start with Alexis. Do you want to tell us what you have got going right now that you want to promote?
Because I can see into the future and know what I'm doing in June.
Yes.
Well, hopefully I am telling you, I am telling you, because the future, this is like a Spaceballs episode. Then is now. Now is now. Then is now. Night Games should be cover revealed and everything. This is Storm Inside series, and hopefully I'm starting to tell you about the book 7 and the T series too. All of this information, however, will be available on my website, alexisandbooks.com, and you should be on my newsletter, where you'll get all of the most up-to-date information on all the things that are happening in the future.
Oh yeah,
absolutely. This makes me want to do it. I can totally date myself because I've already dated myself by disclosing my upcoming birthday. But it makes me think of the Conan O'Brien who did In the Year 2000?
Yes, I loved that series.
Yes, that's what it makes me think of. I'm going to say in June, just check out my website, marychrisescobar.com, and you'll find out whatever I'm up to, because no matter what I do, I'm going to filter it through that website. So
exactly.
Beautiful. So I can tell you for sure that the pre-orders are up for Julia Kelly's, speaking about my self in the third person, The Look of Love. I may also have cover revealed and have a pre-order up for the second book in the Matchmaker of Edinburgh series, which is The Taste of Temptation. I'm not 100% sure when that's all coordinating. We're doing some behind-the-scenes stuff right now, but even earlier than that, under my Julia Blake name, Changing the Play is up for pre-order and is a sexy new sports series that I am launching this August. So you can also go to juliakellywrites.com for more information about all of that. For First Draft, you can go to firstdraftwriting.com, I believe, and sign up for our newsletter. If you guys are listening on a podcast feed, please go ahead and give us a rating. It really helps people find us and find more information about writing advice. And then if you're on YouTube, give us a thumbs up as well. We will be back in July. Very excited because we will be entering the summer and the height of conference season for us. So we are going to be back talking a little bit, I believe, about that. So until then, go ahead and keep writing, and we'll see you then.